Hi there, I'm Caroline Mitchell, canine behaviourist at Good Doggy. We don't talk about trauma enough when it comes to dog behaviour. In fact, not all dog behaviour courses even properly teach it in any kind of real depth. But we should be talking about this. As we'll discover in this set of videos, we'll find out that trauma changes the way a dog sees the world, which can have a massive impact on their behaviour and the way that they respond to normal rehabilitation methods. In these trauma videos, I want to talk about what it is and why it's different. I want to talk about why trauma is much more than just a bad experience, and why some dogs are more vulnerable to it than others, the types of behaviour problems it might cause, and crucially, some solutions that you might implement with your own dog, whether they have trauma or not. Today, we'll talk about what it is, the impact of low resilience, and how it changes the way your dog's mind works, and I'll give you something to get started with at the end. This technique is great for a first step for any dog that is struggling with anxiety or reactive behaviour, but it's especially important for the traumatised dog. So let's start with what trauma actually is. So let's start with what exactly trauma is. According to www.camh.ca, trauma is the lasting emotional response that often results from living through a traumatic event. Experiencing a traumatic event can harm a person's sense of safety, sense of self, and ability to regulate emotions and navigate relationships. I really love this definition. It does refer to people, but trauma can affect dogs and domesticated animals just the same way as it does with people. Notice that it draws attention to the lasting emotional response. In trauma, emotion continues to overwhelm when it's not been resolved. This makes the individual feel unsafe all of the time. So this can result in behaviour problems that you might be familiar with in your dog. We will talk more about these in detail as we go on, but some obvious examples include anxiety, depression, aggressive outbursts, rage, that kind of thing, reactivity, poor social skills, OCD, and separation anxiety is another really big one. Note that trauma is not caused by the event itself specifically. Trauma comes from the unresolved energy that has been left behind. It is a sense of helplessness that comes from a bad experience, that inability to act, the failure to keep the dog safe. Dogs that run or fight a bad experience dispel their energy in a really productive way. They do much better and they are less likely to suffer trauma as a result of that incident. Dogs that get a fright and run away are able to release that energy. Dogs that hear fireworks and can't hide or run will not resolve that energy. That energy will get trapped inside them. So a dog that fights back when attacked will do better compared to a dog that is forced to be petted without allowing them to complain or object. Earlier, I drew attention to the fact that only domesticated animals and humans suffer with trauma. And this is because wild animals behave on instinct. They fight or flight as the situation requires. They're not restrained by rules or laws or social pressure. They don't have to deal with leads and crates or any of those kinds of things that will keep a dog trapped and prevent them from behaving in a normal way. They run when they can and they fight when they can't. We have interfered with that process and our domesticated animals are now at risk of trauma as a result of that. So how is trauma different from other kinds of fear reaction? So we know that unlike a bad experience, trauma is not just shrugged off. It stays with that dog and changes the way that they behave moving forward. It changes the way they think and it changes the way they react in all things. Because trauma changes the way the brain functions and regulates its emotions. So a traumatized dog becomes alert for danger all of the time. Dogs with trauma tend to generalize their triggers. So it might just start with an attack by, say, a medium-sized black Labrador in an open area of the park. When a trigger becomes generalized, it starts to spread. In an alert mind, the dog does not have time to work out all of the details. When your dog is in a traumatized state and they are looking for danger all around them, they'll see it everywhere. So triggers might now start to include things that are like the original. So we started off with a medium black lab, but maybe now other black dogs or other medium dogs will behave as a trigger for your dog. Perhaps they start to feel vulnerable in open spaces, and eventually it might spread to all dogs and all open spaces, or even just being outside. This could happen to a dog that's traumatized by firework bangs. Once the trauma is set in, it will start spreading. I remember a dog that was triggered by bin lids banging and dropped items, the wind in the chimney. Any kind of really sudden noise would trigger them. Eventually, this dog refused to go outside, and this was all because of one firework which went off when they were trapped on their lead. Previously, they had been fine with fireworks, but on this one occasion, they'd been out with their owner. A firework had gone off near them. The dog hadn't been able to escape, and that trauma then set in. And from that point forward, then they were having problems with fireworks, and then it spread to all of these other kinds of noises and a fear of outside. So this just shows us how important it is not to face our dogs, to face their fears. Every time our dogs get trapped in a fear response, the problem will worsen. Feeling safe is very important. So traumatized dogs don't think too hard about their triggers, they just react. Their emergency system is especially twitchy. So when something comes along that makes them feel threatened, they will compare the level of fear that they're experiencing to situations that have elicited the same level of fear in the past, and they will respond in just the same way as they did before. We're going to start to talk about why some dogs are more vulnerable than others. But before we do that, I just want to make a very quick note about where to look for getting help. If you aren't sure how to approach trauma recovery with your own dog, if you have any concerns or doubts, or maybe you're not even sure if he has trauma, please get in touch with an experienced positive-only behaviourist who has a good understanding of what your dog is going through and how to help them recover from trauma. Getting this wrong could be damaging, and if you're using the wrong methods, you could end up reducing resilience and put your dog into a state of helplessness. This might look like success, but actually the dog has just regressed deeper into trauma and started to shut down. Find a specialist who has done separate trauma training. Many dog behaviour courses don't go anywhere near enough detail. I've studied trauma in humans and animals for longer than many behaviourists study just dog behaviour alone. We are out there, so please look us up. This kind of training can be done online really easily, just using a series of videos and conversations and asking the right questions. So don't worry if there isn't somebody in your area. I work with dogs all over the UK with huge success, and some further even afield. I can do an assessment and bespoke plan for you to help you tackle trauma prior to rehabilitation. And I can help you with the rehabilitation too. So please get in touch for more information. I'm going to put my details in the description. But if you're not sure, getting help from somebody that you can actually speak to and ask questions for is really invaluable. So, why are some dogs more vulnerable to this than others? Most dogs are subjected to fireworks at some point in their life, but not all of them develop trauma. And it's not always big events like being attacked or fireworks. Simple things like an injury, an illness, sudden noises, a loss in the family, losing the family home, becoming a rescue dog, or even being approached when they're trapped and feeling helpless can all contribute to developing trauma. There are a lot of factors here, and it's not just about that unresolved energy or helplessness. Some dogs are still able to bounce back when they have the same experience. So why is that? Well, resilience is our ability to bounce back when things go wrong. Resilience is about how robust is our mental health? How will we cope when the unexpected happens or something comes along that scares us or makes us anxious? Resilience is made up by a lot of things. So your dog's breed may well have something to do with how much resilience they have or haven't got. Once upon a time, we used to breed dogs that were easily trained, obedient, and worked really hard. Those dogs were confident and they were full of resilience. These were the dogs that we preferred, and these were the dogs we bred from. And those traits got passed down to their puppies, and then they got passed down to their puppies, and so on. But things are changing now. These days, we much prefer our pet dogs to be small and cuddly. We like them to cuddle up with us and we like them to adore us. In fact, the clingier, the better. Clingy behaviour, though, is the opposite of resilience. So that trait is now being concentrated instead of that confident, resilient dog. We're now getting dogs that are more clingy and less resilient. And as each generation is born, they're becoming less and less resilient. In particular, small breeds like cockapoos, mini poodles, Yorkshire Terriers are all being bred with particularly low resilience. This, of course, doesn't apply to every single small puppy or every single cockapoo, but the more we try to look for these kinds of clingy, snuggly little dogs, the more the problem gets worse. Lockdown amplified this hugely because the demand for puppies suddenly skyrocketed, and so many people bred from their very, very cute dogs that they love dearly. So we now have a lot of very poor resilient dogs that have been bred specifically for their lack of resilience. So perhaps if you have one of those breeds of dogs, it might be likely that your dog has suffered trauma from a small or minor bad experience. This is not the only factor though. Rescue dogs are particularly vulnerable too. Rescue dogs don't have a support network, so to them, everybody is a stranger. When they first come to their new home, there is no stable routine. Their home might not be safe. They don't know yet. They haven't been there long enough. They are particularly vulnerable to developing trauma. Everything is new. There are new smells, new people, new sounds. All of these things are overwhelming for a dog, and they all contribute to that feeling of a lack of control and a lack of safety. So even for that dog, minor experiences could become traumatic ones. Even being bathed or being visited by new people, being taught a new trick or being told off for peeing in the house, or being forced to do anything like come out of a hiding spot especially. So this is why we advise people when they first get their rescue dog to do nothing with them for the first few days. Don't walk them, don't brush them, don't introduce new people to them, no matter how tempting it is, no matter how stinky they are when they come out of the rescue centre. Just put up with it for a few more days, just to allow them to settle into their environment and start to feel safe there. Once they've started to feel safe, they become less vulnerable to trauma. Their resilience will start to grow and they'll be able to cope with more as each day goes by. Less and less stuff will feel new to them, less and less stuff will overwhelm them, and therefore it's much safer to start introducing this new stuff to them. Teenagers are also very likely to suffer trauma. They have a very reduced tolerance to things, unlike a puppy who is designed to take everything in their stride. A puppy is designed to be curious and to explore everything. They want to know everything about their environment. They want to experience as much as possible. Teenagers are the opposite. Their fluctuating hormones also can mean increased anxiety. So rather than being curious, they're now being anxious. And as we'll find out as we go through this video, curiosity and anxiety are the opposite of each other, and they can overcome each other. So we'll talk more about how that works later on. But for our teenager, we need to make sure all of their socialization is done before those teenage months kick in. Even better, do it before 16 weeks. So we aren't trying to introduce new things to them at this stage. Neutering is risky at this stage too. That's the first time your dog might have a surgery. They might be away from home from you, and they're going to be doing this at a very vulnerable time. So neutering should happen before they become a teenager or after they've passed through this phase. Other things that often get introduced to a teenage dog at the worst possible time is their first groom, first trip to boarding kennels, and things like that. So these are the kinds of things you want to introduce your dog to long before they hit those teenage years or months, and you want to wait until after they've done that if you've missed that deadline. Relationships will play a big part in how much resilience your dog has. How well supported does your dog feel within those relationships, and how strong are the relationships? Being part of a close, stable family increases resilience. Being supported means being advocated for, and a dog that is advocated for is never pushed beyond their limits and never forced to experience something that they aren't comfortable with. When we push them beyond those limits and force them to put up with things that they are anxious about, this will start to erode that trust and it makes them feel unsafe. Punishment-based methods will also decrease a pup's trust. That dynamic then becomes one of fear. The dog is afraid to do the wrong thing. They are afraid to not get things right. And when you're trying to train them, that fear will make them feel very, very lonely. Rather than being a supportive, safe relationship, this dog can't depend on his family to keep him safe. Actually, it's quite the opposite. That kind of training method feels very unsafe, and this erodes resilience. Having a lack of doggy friends will also have a big impact on resilience. Those strong relationships with dogs, as well as people that he can be friends with, will boost his social skills and his confidence. But we're going to come back to that in just a moment. Ongoing stress. This is also a factor for rescue dogs and teenagers. And if your dog has other kinds of behavior problems and pre-existing anxiety-based problems and reactive behavior, these all take their toll and add stress into a daily routine for your dog. Anxiety-based problems and reactive behavior problems already trigger fight or flight. So these will take a big toll on your dog's resilience. Constantly looking for triggers, constantly having adrenaline triggered will not be good for their overall resilience levels. So that makes them vulnerable then when things happen around them, and they will turn those bad experiences into traumatic ones. We've already talked about punishment-based techniques. These types of training methods erode resilience. Even minor corrections like getting shouted at, having a lead jerked, all of these things can take their toll and add stress. They make the dog feel unsafe. They make the dog feel vulnerable. Using things like prong collars, check chains, and e-collars will obviously have a much bigger impact on that resilience. But we can see even small things, even little things that we might accidentally do out of frustration or whatever, can all take their toll. A dog's perception on their own ability will make a big difference to how resilient they are. So this refers to how confident are they of their own skills? How confident are they that if they needed to, they could defend themselves? If they needed to, could they hunt for their own food? If they got into an argument, would they be able to resolve that, with as little danger or risk as possible? Dogs practice these skills with their friends. They practice them with other dogs. They pretend to hunt each other. They pretend to fight with each other. And often they can be very, very convincing. And sometimes people think that these are situations that are getting out of control. But actually, these dogs are just being really good at practicing these skills. This is very, very important, because when you're very confident in your ability to keep yourself safe, then your resilience is high. Imagine the Rock walking down the street. He's not concerned that people are going to be able to harm him. He's not concerned that bad things are going to happen to him. So he walks down the road with a very big sense of security and safeness. So he will be much more confident than somebody who regularly gets picked on and has no ability at all to defend themselves. The way that those two people will walk down the street will be very, very different. One's full of resilience and the other one has no confidence at all in themselves. These skills, I say, will be practiced with other dogs, and this is an ongoing process. So even as puppies and within their litter mates, they will practice these skills too. And as we can see, a lack of these skills can make a dog feel helpless. So when your puppy has come from a home that maybe there weren't any other dogs, or perhaps there was a problem and they were the only puppy bought, then this is something very much to concentrate on, because your puppy will very likely have low resilience in this area. Poor health and fitness, just a general poor diet, can really knock resilience too. All kinds of health conditions can knock resilience, and getting that checked out is always very important, because you never know what's lying underneath the surface. But constantly being in pain, constantly feeling ill will have a massive effect on your puppy's ability to cope and their resilience overall. Their poor diet, if they're not getting enough food, not getting it at regularly times, then this will also affect that, as well as just general fatigue, lack of sleep, things like that. When your puppy is in full health and they are well fed and they have had plenty of sleep, then they will be feeling much more resilient for what the day has to offer to them. Personality is also another big factor when it comes to resilience. Some dogs are just born more resilient than others. We know that some breeds of puppy are more susceptible to a lack of resilience than others. But even just in one normal litter of puppies, you'll have one that's very confident and you'll have one that's very not confident, that lacks resilience and lacks that ability to bounce back. We know that their life stages can affect how resilient they are. Even before birth, experiences of the mum, if she experiences anxiety a lot, if she's malnutritioned, if she doesn't have good health, then that will affect the puppy. That might contribute to neglect with that puppy. After birth, the way that she cares for that puppy and brings the puppy up will make a big difference to their resilience. Being exposed to their litter mates, having that opportunity to play and experiment and learn skills for conflict resolution, hunting skills, fighting skills, all of that helps. We know that adolescents are particularly vulnerable to a low resilience. And in adults, even things like neglect and abuse will obviously take their toll. I don't think we need to go into a lot of detail about how being a victim of abuse or neglect will reduce a dog's resilience and their ability to bounce back and cope with things that happen in their life. And one more thing before we move away from resilience, whether a dog becomes traumatized by an event or not is also affected by how much danger they perceive themselves to be in at the time. Their ability to cope will be affected by the severity of the event. That's how big, how scary was it, how life-threatening they felt it was, and how prolonged it was. Their perception of danger level is going to be unique to the dog. So we don't get to decide what we think is a scary event or not. So really that's what we're looking for in a traumatic event. And before I finish up, I want to leave you something to be getting on with. So your homework for today is to stop reliving the trauma with your dog. I want you to avoid any situation that might trigger an anxious response, a fight or flight response. Just avoid, avoid, avoid. I'm going to explain why this is really important for a trauma sufferer next time, but you could check out my video, Should I Push My Dog to Face His Fears? For many reasons, avoidance can be part of the solution for any fear or reactive-based problem. So even if your dog has or doesn't have trauma, there is a lot of benefit to starting off with a position of avoiding and stopping reliving that same moment and that same trauma and triggering that fight or flight response over and over again. I will discuss that more in the next video. And on the next video, we're also going to be talking about what does trauma look like and does your dog even have it? So we'll talk about that. We'll also be talking about strategies for solving trauma. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do it now, and then you won't miss the next part of this video series. Take care for now. Bye bye.